Hey, civic students. I've taken you along a journey of the foundations of American government, and a few things we talked about were people, events, and documents that affected our current day Constitution and government. So, the next lecture is going to talk about the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. Once the founding fathers decided that Articles of Confederation wasn't going to work because the central government was way too weak, they decided to write the current day Constitution. But the important part was it needed to be approved by the states. And there are a lot of people that weren't happy with the Constitution because they felt like it was going to be too powerful of a central government and the states would lose their rights. So two groups began to develop, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists were for the Constitution. Remember, F and F. Federalists are for the Constitution. They felt like a stronger central government would help solve many of the problems that were arising following rebellions like Shays' rebellions, conflicts between the states, and just disagreements overall between the states and the federal government. The other group that developed was the Anti-Federalists. They did not want to ratify the Constitution. They were against it. They feared a strong central government would develop a leader that turns out to be like a king, and they really feared that. They wanted the states to have more power. So the question is, why would individuals be opposed to newly created Constitution? Remember, the Federalists are for the Constitution. So the Federalists supported taking some powers from the states and giving them the national government. They wanted to have more of a cohesive country rather than the Articles of Confederation and a loose league of friendship. They wanted the states to be much more in line with one another, and a stronger central government would accomplish that. That Articles of Confederation didn't have a strong central leader, an executive person, and people felt like the United States needed someone in the executive branch. So the Federalists wanted a single person to, let's say, be president of the country. The Anti-Federalists were really against it, and one of the key things that they were against was it didn't have a Bill of Rights. Ideas of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press were not in the Constitution, and the Anti-Federalists continue to emphasize it was so important to protect the rights of individuals from the federal government. They wanted the states to continue to have more power. They didn't want it to be a ruler like a king or like a nowadays president, because they felt like they would infringe on their rights as people. And one way to check the executive branch, Anti-Federalists believe, was the legislative branch would have much more power than the executive branch. The Federalists wanted to divide the power among three branches: executive, judicial, and legislative, and they felt these three branches would check one another. They would balance the power, and this would ensure that the executive branch would not have too much power like a king. Those Anti-Federalists just didn't want to have a single leader because it really looked like a king, and they wanted to make sure that that didn't occur. Over and over, the Anti-Federalists insisted that there had to be a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And the reason for that is they wanted to protect the rights of citizens. Same thing that the English Bill of Rights did in the Magna Carta. You know, all those rules and laws of jury trials and right to know your charges, all those things they felt were important parts that we need to have in the Constitution. I want you to stop and take a look at a map of the 13 states, and you can see the purple areas were much more Federalist, and the kind of peach areas were much more likely to be Anti-Federalist. And you could see more on the coastline was much more likely to be Federalist, and kind of more towards the country areas, which would be much more likely to be Anti-Federalist. Both sides published their views in newspapers and pamphlets. Some of the most famous essays written were called the Federalist Papers. They were for the Constitution. If you look at Hamilton and watch that, Hamilton sings a song talking about how he wrote many of them and how he was one of the driving forces behind the Federalist Papers. So the key writers of the Federalist Papers were James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. These papers were anonymous at the time, and no one knew who were writing them. And the focus was on the Constitution and not supposed to be about the people who were writing them. It took a lot of months before the 9 states required to ratify the Constitution before it became the current Constitution that we have now. Many states were wavering because the fear of having too strong of a central government. So 9 states ratified it, so it became the current constitution that we have today. If you look at the ratification dates here, goes all the way from December of 1787 to May of 1790 when Rhode Island finally signed. Rhode Island was really hesitant and they held out, just like the Constitutional Convention. They didn't show up to that either. They didn't want to have that strong central government. So 2 very important states were Virginia and New York. They had not yet passed the Constitution. Part of the reasons why is 2 very important Virginians, George Mason and Patrick Henry, were against the Constitution. They really wanted to have that Bill of Rights in the Constitution to protect the rights of the citizens. The Federalists said we don't need a Bill of Rights because each state has their own Bill of Rights within their own state constitutions, but Henry and Mason insisted that need to be part of signing the Constitution for their states to agree. So that's when the Founding Fathers got together and decided to include the first 10 amendments to our Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So really, the Bill of Rights wasn't in the first round of states ratifying the Constitution. Once added, the final states decided to ratify the Constitution. So here we go. I'm going to test you on your knowledge of Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. I want you to pull out a piece of paper and number 1 to 10, or you can do it in notability. I'm going to ask you to pause the video between each one of the statements that I read. On your piece of paper, for each statement I read, I'll number them 1 through 10. As I read them, I want you to put an F if you believe a Federalist said it, or an A if you believe the Anti-Federalist said it. Statement number 1. The present Confederation is insufficient to preserve the states. That's definitely a Federalist. Why? Because they believed that the Articles of Confederation had too weak of a central government, and they felt like the country would fall apart unless we had a stronger central government. Statement 2. The federal system will be a dictatorship by the national government. The states will have only very limited power. This statement is clearly an anti-federalist statement because it's emphasizing the idea that the federal government would be way too strong and almost like a king. Statement number 3. The Constitution created a powerful national government without a Bill of Rights to defend the people against the tyranny of the majority. This is an anti-federalist statement because it's emphasizing the idea that there is no Bill of Rights in the Constitution. So they're talking about, again, that the national government will be much too powerful. Statement 4. A strong national government will attract the nation's best leaders. This is definitely a Federalist statement because it emphasizes that the best and the brightest will show up at the national government and lead our country. Statement number 5. In the Confederation, a failure to separate powers created a government that was weak and unstable. National government could not prevent the states from violating the civil rights of its citizens. This is a Federalist statement you could see because it's saying that because the federal government is so weak, that state governments might infringe the rights of their own citizens. Number 6, the Constitution derives all its power directly from the great body of the American people, not from the independent states. This is a Federalist statement. Why? Because it's emphasizing that as a country, the federal government will help keep the states together as one country. Number 7, the Constitution created a national government with monstrous powers that will guarantee the rights of individuals. Obviously, an anti-federalist statement. Why? Because of the monstrous powers of the federal government. The emphasis, again, is too strong of a federal government. Number 8, a strong national government can provide individual freedom, peace among the states, and the means of a defense against foreign nations. A Federalist statement, once again. Why? Because it talks about protecting individual freedom, peace among the states. Remember, in the Articles of Confederation, there was a lot of arguing between the states. And also, we need to somehow protect our country from foreign nations. Number 9, with the Confederation, the United States cannot have respect abroad because there is no respect for the national government at home. Federalists felt like the Articles of Confederation basically was the laughing stock of the world because we really acted as 13 different countries. So the Federalists were saying, hey, we need to have a stronger central government to show that we are a strong country and we are one. Finally, number 10, under the Constitution, the state governments will be annihilated or will continue to exist for no purpose. Here's the Anti-Federalists again emphasizing that the state governments would be overtaken by a strong federal government, and they feared that the federal government would infringe on the states' rights. In the end, I feel like one of the reasons why the Constitution was ratified is because the Federalists had a document. They had something to base upon their arguments on. The Antifederalists just had reasons why not to ratify the Constitution. They had no competing documents. So I think that's important that you understand that the Federalists had at least something on paper that people could look at and then make changes to. And that's why they added the first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights, because they were listening to the Anti-Federalists. In class, we'll talk about some document-based questions. Remember, a DBQ, a document-based question, deals with a picture, a cartoon, maybe a Federalist excerpt of their writing, or the Declaration of Independence, or common sense, and you need to read those documents and then answer questions. So DBQs, document-based questions. Well, hopefully you can feel a little bit of the struggle of the foundations of our government and then the transition from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. Hopefully this gives you a better idea that our founding fathers were very focused on creating a government that has checks and balances.